Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. We are actually having a beautiful, sunny summer day. It is like summer after a week of...
It was cloudy. I kept looking
at
your
sweatshirt outside every day.
I kept looking at your weather, and honestly, I was a little bit jealous because it has been so sticky and humid down here in San Diego for the last, 2 weeks. It's been like 80% humidity every single day. I've been sweating. It's been 2 t-shirt days every single day, pretty much. But anyway.
Well, you shouldn't wear them both at once if it's so hot.
All right. Okay. We are here today, though, kind of essentially getting into the end of our real summer episode, since training camp is going to start next week on the 29th. It's kind of crazy.
Otherwise known as digging for content.
Exactly. And the 29th is fast approaching, so we'll have some stuff to talk about on the field, which is exciting. We have a little bit of news to talk about today. We are also going to talk about the Packers versus the Contenders around the NFC, because we talked about last week, if you want to go listen to that one, talked about, are the Packers underrated / disrespected? And we talked about the NFL Top 100 list. We talked about Super Bowl odds. And the Super Bowl odds thing kind of got me thinking, because around this time last year, we talked about the Packers and what they needed to do to make the leap to become like a true contender. And this year, I was looking at the Super Bowl odds, and I think we were around 16th or something like that. And I was like, that feels kind of low. I'm looking at some of these teams ahead of us, and some of them I would say are better than us. And then the other ones, I'm like, you know what? I feel like we should be ahead of them. So we're going to talk about that today, how the Packers stack up against the contenders around the NFC based on Super Bowl odds. And we're mostly looking at the NFC because the AFC is kind of you could argue, oh, they just have a different path and that's why they're ahead, yada, yada, yada. So we're going to look at the NFC contenders. We're going to use the same kind of methodology that we were using when we were comparing the Packers to the rest of the NFC North. So we'll talk about that. And just kind of generally that. And then next week, we're going to do our training camp previews and talk about the battles we're looking at. So keep the dial tuned here. If you like what you hear, subscribe, whether that's, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then follow us on Blue Sky at Father Son Packer for updates on the latest Packers news, other Packers content we enjoy, other stuff from other people, when we put new episodes out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But Dad, speaking of news, we did actually, although it is middle of July, get some real Packers news. And that is that Devonte Wyatt, interior defensive lineman for the Packers, you might know, signed an extension, 3 years, $57 million, with a $20 million signing bonus, as originally reported by Ian Rappaport. This makes him around the 18th highest paid interior defensive lineman in the league. Dad, what were your thoughts when you saw this extension come across?
Okay, can I go into this without reading the cues that you've written in there for me to speak my piece?
Just what were your
behind
thoughts?
the behind the scenes stage directions?
Yeah, what did you think? What did you feel about it? I thought
it was
it was a good deal. You liked the extension. He is a little bit older. He's 28. That's the one thing for me, is he was an old rookie coming in. So despite this being a second contract, he's a little bit older, but it sounds you like it.
I like it. I think you see a decent number, I don't know what the percentages are, of interior defensive linemen playing into their mid-30s. So if he's on one of those trajectories, he's got a lot of, runway left in front of him. And he has been impactful when he's been on the field. Of course, the big thing is he gets dinged up and then his play is down a little bit, or he misses like a quarter, 30% of the year, which he, did last year with a serious injury that made him miss the end of the year. But he has been a defensive lineman who affects the pass game. So he's got a kind of a valued skill, and one that the Packers had only one of on the team last year. Mm-hmm. And when he wasn't out, they were not getting anything done inside for pass rush. So he's been, very important to the team to have him on there. I think he's got more good years left in front of him. And, I think it's worth it. He's not getting paid all that much. As a D tackle who, I could go over how he's ranked in the last couple of years.
Yeah. So, because I think people would be surprised, and maybe talk a little bit about how we're doing our rankings, because we're combining a lot of different metrics into one. I think people would be surprised to see how well he stacks up. And just kind of to talk about the contract, like you said, it's not a ton of money. It's, obviously, obviously it is a lot of money. $57 million is a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. But in terms of other interior defensive linemen, other contracts from this offseason, Jordan Davis got $26 million a year. Cam Hayward got $18 million a year. People are comparing this to the Franklin Myers deal that was done this offseason. But to me, there are a few major differences there that kind of, so because Franklin Myers is kind of similar in that he's more of a pass rusher as a defensive lineman, but Wyatt will be making $2 million per year less, which doesn't sound like a lot, but is not nothing. Franklin Myers is 2 years older, and it seems like we don't know this 100% yet. But usually the Packers, when they have these contracts, most of the guarantees are just in the signing bonus. And if that's the case here, it would also be a lot less guaranteed for Wyatt as well. So it's hard for me to find a comparable contract. He's getting just a little bit under what Osa Odigizua is getting. I think Odigizua is a better player, but he also signed his extension last offseason. So you got to kind of factor in the general, usually inflation and rise of the salary cap into that. So he's getting paid kind of like a bit down from that, which I think seems reasonable. It sounds like also, good news wise, this seems to me to indicate that they are feeling pretty good about where his injury rehab and recovery is timeline wise. So that's some good news as well. But Dad, do you want to talk about where he stacks up amongst interior defensive linemen? Because he really, I think, is playing better than maybe Packers fans might realize.
Yeah, so if you look over everything that he's done, he's been he was a better run defender than I expected when I started looking at the numbers. So I spent this offseason working on a project to be able to create a ranking system from stats from multiple sources. PFF, NFL Pro, FTN Fantasy, Pro Football Reference, PFSN, both offense and defense. And so basically I put in every stat for every defensive player, but for the D tackles, I didn't bother giving them a pass coverage score. Mm-hmm. But for the pass rush, there are 11 different pass rush metrics, things like win rate, get off speed, quick pressure rate, and then 5 run defense metrics like tackles per run snap, tackle depth of tackle, stop percentage, missed tackle rate, things like that. In 2025, so that the overall rank, which combines both the run defense and the pass rush. I should mention that each of these stats is then weighted for how much it contributes to the team's overall defensive performance. So by seeing how much they correlate with DVOA for the whole defense, and then scaling them to reflect the ones that correlate more and thus are more important. In 2025, he was 16th overall, 19th in pass rush, and 19th against the run. In 2024, he was 4th overall, 8th in pass rush, and 2nd against the run. That surprised me. I didn't realize he was that good against the run that year. And in 2023, he was 13th overall, 8th in pass rush, but struggling against the run in his second year there, 72nd against the run. But generally been way better than any other of our defensive linemen. The only one now that they have Hargrave, they have 2 who are in the top 30.
Yeah, and the thing with Wyatt that I think is also important to keep in mind, though, which you mentioned is kind of like an availability thing, but also just snap-wise thing. Because, so I talked about the Franklin Myers thing, about why that contract is a little bit different to me. The thing with Franklin Myers, though, is he played 550-ish snaps each of the last 2 years. Wyatt has only played 350 snaps each of the last 2 years. So he's playing a lot less. And I do think for this contract to really work out like we hope it does, I do think he needs to start playing more. In 2023, he played 640 snaps. So he has shown the ability to take on more snaps than he has the last 2 years. But I do think that part of the I gamble's the wrong word, but part of the equation here is he probably does need to play more, right? And last year was mostly due to injury. He played 10 games before he broke his leg in that game against the Lions. But the year before, he also did not play a ton of snaps either.
Right. So this is always the quandary. You would like to get more out of him. Does his play
efficiency
continue
take a hit
to be as efficient with a greater workload and the fatigue and et cetera?
Yeah, because last year he only played 10 games, but the year before he played 14 games and still only played 340 snaps. So, but I think that's going to be a big thing is, does the efficiency scale up? But overall, like you said, I'm on board with this contract. I don't think 19 years is crazy, especially if the guarantees are as low as we expect. And also, the defensive line, the interior defensive line is pretty thin right now, I think it's fair to say. Hargrave was also dealing with an injury in minicamp, so unclear on I guess we'll see in training camp how he's looking if he's back out there. The only other thing is Wyatt's age being a little bit older. I was a little surprised to see this extension, to be honest, because of his age. I was like, oh, the Packers hate signing guys this old. They hate signing guys into their 30s. But like you mentioned, there is a track record now of interior defensive linemen playing pretty well into their 30s. So hopefully that's the case for Wyatt. Any final things you want to talk about with the Wyatt extension, or should we start talking about how the Packers stack up against the contenders of the NFL?
Well, I guess one more thing I should say about the age is this is a little bit of the theme of the offseason. And maybe a sign that the Packers think they are close to contending over these next 2 years and are willing to have some veterans on the roster.
Do you think it's, if that's the case, that they're this is kind of a trend of signing more older players, like you mentioned, Wyatt being older, but then Franklin, Hargrave, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think that's a case of them thinking that they're closer to contending and wanting veterans? Or do you think it's a case of, hey, we think we've been underperforming the past few years record-wise, and we think that has to do with the youth on the team?
It could be both.
Okay.
They want a little veteran leadership to show the younger players what it takes to seal the deal in games and in the season.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that is, at least me personally, I think that's a little bit overrated. But at the same time, I do think you can't try the same thing over and over again. So I do think it couldn't hurt to have some vets.
And we're still the fifth youngest team. It's not like we got all of a sudden become an old team. We just added a few veterans sprinkled in here and there.
We also lost the oldest player on the team with McManus leaving. So
yeah,
so that's you kind of in with a couple old guys, out with one old guy. So I guess we'll see.
So you say the median age may have actually gone up more than is showing because of one older player leaving.
Exactly. So I guess that kind of does it for Wyatt. I'm excited to see him this year. I think he's poised to be a very important piece of the defense, especially early on with Micah not back yet and needing the pass rush juice there. Let's talk, though, about the contenders around the NFL, because like I mentioned earlier, last week, the topic was, are the Packers underrated? And part of that discussion was talking about how the Packers stacked up against in terms of Super Bowl odds against the rest of the NFL. And the reason we talked about that was I was surprised to see how low Green Bay was in those, in that group. In terms of how FanDuel has it, which was just the first one that came up when I Googled it, that's why I went with it. The FanDuel Super Bowl odds right now go Rams, Ravens, Bills, Seahawks, Niners, Chargers, Chiefs, Lions, Patriots, Bengals, Eagles, Texans, Broncos, Packers at 14th, tied with the Cowboys. So 14th, 15th is where the Packers are in terms of Super Bowl odds. And so that's right in the middle. And we talked about last week whether or not we felt that was fair. And, on one side, we were talking about, some of these teams ahead of the Packers, I think Green Bay is better than, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit today, is how we match up against those, higher level teams. But then the other thing was, we have gotten 7th in the NFC 2 years running and lost in the first round of the playoffs. And that's about what the 14th team does. So, fair is fair. At some point, you are what your record says, the Bill Parcells. You are what your record is. You are, how you play.
They are who we thought they were.
They are who we thought they were. So there is that. But today we're going to go through and talk about individually how the Packers match up against a subset of these, top flight contenders. And the ones we picked to go match up the Packers against were the NFC teams. Because we could look at the AFC teams, but it's a little bit more topical to look at the NFC teams because those are the teams that the Packers are going to have to beat if they want to make the Super Bowl. And also, when you look at Super Bowl odds like this, they're often heavily skewed by what conference you're in because, certain conferences, the NFC odds are going to generally be lower because the Rams and Seahawks are taking, I think, in at least how I view it, such a big slice of the pie because I think they're so clearly better than the rest of the NFC, just on paper at least. And I mean, if you look at the odds right now, the Rams are at plus 550. The next team down is at plus 1100. So the Rams are like heavy favorites to win the Super Bowl right now, which, makes sense because on paper their team is really good. And then they added Myles Garrett. Like they were already the second best team in the league last year, pretty clearly. I think pretty convincingly. They're the only team that really played Seattle close.
Won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, if they beat Seattle, they're going to win the Super Bowl. If they don't fumble, what did they fumble? 2 punts? And they recovered one of them, but I think they also fumbled the second one and then didn't recover it. If they had better special teams, they probably make the Super Bowl and I think they pretty handily beat the Patriots. But so they were the second best team last year and then they added all this stuff. So it makes sense for them to be, so high ahead, but just kind of like as an idea of that. But so we're going to look really quickly and compare how we feel the Packers stack up on paper and holistically and just kind of analytically as well, using kind of the same methodology that we talked about for the NFC North, which we'll touch on in just a second. We're going to look at how the Packers stack up against the Rams, Seahawks, Niners, Lions, Eagles, and Cowboys, those 6 teams, because those are the teams with the same or better Super Bowl odds than the Packers right now. Dad, do you want to talk, though, briefly, just kind of a quick kind of rundown of how we are numerically comparing these teams? If you want like a full deep dive into how the methodology works, you can go back and check out our NFC North pods. We did like a little bit at the beginning there. That was like more of like a 5 to 7-ish minute thing talking about it. But Dad, do you want a brief like elevator pitch on how we are comparing these teams analytically? And then we'll also do a little bit of holistic stuff as well. But analytically, how are we comparing these teams?
Yeah, so we're getting a score for each position group on offense and defense. And so unlike the North, where we looked at the bench as well, this is just the starters. And we're not talking about special teams. Thank God.
Packers immediately last. Immediately 32nd.
I neither have the appetite to do that analysis, nor do I have the appetite to talk about it right now. But for each, and then for what I called a starting lineup was essentially on defense, base defense, plus a nickel defender. So 12 starters on defense, and similarly 12 starters on offense. So it's like 12 personnel plus a third receiver. So you have 2 boundary receivers and slot receivers, so counted as starters. So that's to begin with. And then for each position group, it gives get the appropriate grade, either tight ends receiving and blocking, quarterbacks passing and running, running backs running and receiving, receivers just receiving. I didn't want to go into what would be kind of the minutiae of the rare blocking and running grades that would not have enough statistical power to be confident in anyway.
And like you were saying earlier, each of those like receiving and blocking grades are like a composite score. Like a receiving grade is a composite score of like 11 other metrics combined together.
Right. And passing is like 13, running is 11, blocking is 8, pass blocking and 4 run blocking metrics.
Yeah,
and on defense, there's like 11 coverage, 11 pass rush, and
and for an example of what those metrics might be, it's like yards per coverage snap, missed tackle rate, stuff like that, and then combined together, like we mentioned, with how they kind of align with DVOA overall. But just as an idea, it's
so instead of adding them just together raw, we actually weight them based on which ones seem to have a bit greater contribution to team performance. And so then we get a score for each player, and then we've just added the starters taken from a couple online sources, mostly our lads, and get a score for each position group. And then so we have a center, 2 guards, the 2 starting guards, the 2 tackles, 1 QB. We're not going to backup QB, 1 running back, 2 tight ends, 3 wide receivers. And at first, I was just kind of going by vibes and winging it.
Like 50-50 on the exactly.
Tight end 1 versus tight end 2, and wide receiver 1 versus 2 and 3. And I must confess that when I did this final spreadsheet, I thought I was done 3 different times. There was one time I was like, okay, I've just kind of winged this, and we've been talking all offseason about how we're not just going on vibes. So I spent the time to figure out what was the usage of tight end 1, blocking snaps and routes, versus tight end 2 across the league over the last 8 years to figure out. And it turns out that it's like 60-40 split, tight end 1 versus tight end 2. And then wide receiver 1, and I had picked like 3-1, 75-25. So I had to go back and change all that. And then wide receiver 1 versus 2 versus 3, I just randomly guessed 50%,
30, 20, and it worked.
20%. And I was right on.
Pretty close.
I was off by like 1%.
It's like 48, 32, 20.
So that was a time where vibes worked.
But yeah.
And but that's how I got the position groups. And then I added them all up on offense, all the position to get a single synthetic offensive score, and same for defense. And then add those together to get a total team score, and then a rank based on those scores.
Yeah. So that's kind of how we're comparing these teams in terms of when we're talking about, like this team ranked ahead of this team in these positions. Like if you hear us talking about that, that's what we're talking about. But let's start off and I guess we'll go in order of the Vegas odds. So we're comparing against these 6 other teams, and let's start with the Rams, Dad, who are, I think, rightfully the cream of the crop in the NFL right now, at least, before any games have been played. How do you feel? Well, let's talk about the numbers first. How do the numbers say the Packers stack up against the Rams?
So if you look at the team overall, Rams are number 1 by my metric. So yeah, I did 100 and some hours of work.
Rams are good. Takeaway, Rams are good.
Rams are the best team, So surprised at everybody. They had the number one overall, number 3 defense, number 1 offense. This is based on how players did last year, and then projections for rookies who are supposed to start based on rookies in the same round.
Yeah, historical rookie performance. But so all the player performance is based on last year. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, except if a player missed the year entirely, then it went back to 2024.
But so the Rams, are good. I think looking at how the Packers stack up against the Rams is interesting. Because the Packers, based on our numbers, we have us ranked as about the 5th best team.
Yeah, and so the Packers are one of only 4 teams that is in the top 10 in both offense and defense. It's the Rams, the Seahawks, the Packers, and the Bills. And of course, the Rams and Seahawks are both in the top 5 in offense and defense.
Yeah, very good teams.
And the Packers are 7th in defense and 8th in offense. And so this is listeners, Tommy did not want me to give the pie in the sky.
Not doing the super optimistic
going
offensive
for
line.
the super optimistic offensive line grade here.
Because
which was kind of an exercise of, is there something real behind the Packers telling us they're better at, Ryan, Banks, and Morgan were better at the end of the year. It turned out to be true, but
you can do that for a lot of teams. I think is my argument was we'd have to take the best 5 games of all these other teams too. But so looking
I should
at
also
the Packers,
say that these are optimal lineups.
Yes.
So what we expect them to be without injury when the best players come back, etc. And it applies not just to the Packers but to other teams as well.
But so looking at the Rams versus the Packers specifically, I think what really, stands out initially, you look at quarterback. We have Matthew Stafford 4th and Jordan Love 5th. So pretty clean there. You look at the pass catchers, the weapons. We have the Rams with the best wide receivers, the Packers with the 7th best wide receivers, and then the Packers with the 3rd best tight ends, but the Rams with the 4th best tight ends. So pretty even there. I think what really stands out is when you start looking at the trenches, because right now we are projecting the Packers based on last year's performances and kind of carrying that over to who's playing this year to have the 30th best offensive line in the league. It was really bad. The Packers offensive line was really horrendous last year. And meanwhile, we have the Rams to have the best offensive line and also probably like the 2nd best interior defensive line and the 2nd best edge group. So if you're looking at those teams matched up together, the numbers are saying essentially that the biggest mismatch on the field is going to be their defensive line versus our offensive line. And I think when you think about it holistically as well, this is without Aaron Donald factored in as well, which
right, I could say
horror show.
Donald's not even in this yet.
But I think my first thing is, when we had to play the Browns, we couldn't block anyone on that entire Jordan run. We couldn't block anyone. And so I think the numbers are kind of backing up in my head what my first thought of is we do play the Rams this year. When we play the Rams this year, my first thought is, how are we going to block any of these guys? Because we couldn't last year block Myles Garrett at all when he was like probably on that Browns defensive line was also pretty talented, but the Rams defensive line is no slouch either. And Chris Shula is a good DC. So I think that's the first thing that comes to mind, and the numbers kind of back it up as well, is how do you think we would even go about blocking these guys?
I think we have to have some heavy personnel plus Chris Brooks in the backfield.
Just we're only sending 2 guys out of the route. We've got 8 guys blocking.
It's gonna be like Golden, Watson, and Kraft, running around out to catch balls while everybody else is staying in to help out on blocks.
Jordan run like that. That would be like this matchup specifically. And I also want to talk a little bit about our secondary, our corners specifically versus their receivers, because I think that's the second biggest mismatch. But our O-line versus their defensive line, I mean, I can't imagine if Aaron Donald comes back, what he would do to Aaron Banks. I mean, I'm sure I can go find clips. Aaron Banks played for the Niners for a long time. And I don't think it went very well with how he played against Aaron Donald.
Ragdolled in 2022.
And I mean, Jordan Morgan, bless his heart, against Myles Garrett, I don't think that's going to go well. Maybe Tom has a little bit better luck out there, but oh man. And then
I'm just hoping that Morgan is actually as good a tackle as they think he is, and as he looked in 4 games.
Yeah,
as he looked in 4 games, he was like a top. What did I have him like 20?
To be fair, though, those games were mostly at right tackle. Like
yes,
not,
so
and
you're saying that they should move Zach Tom to left tackle.
I am not against the idea of that, because all I know is in minicamp, not Zach Tom. Jordan Morgan was getting his butt kicked by Lucas Van Ness, either Lucas Van Ness has taken a huge leap or Jordan Morgan was struggling at left tackle. I'm not sure. But you look at the rest of the Rams like defensive line. Byron Young is a tough guy to deal with. Braden Fisk is like a young player who is solid, I would say, is a good player. And then Poona Ford at nose tackle is just like, he's just a brick house in the middle. So I think that's like the number one thing that I look at. And then, like I mentioned, the second biggest mismatch, I think, in the numbers, and then also kind of, you just think about it holistically, is how are a tandem of Keyshawn Nixon and pick your poison of Cisse, Carrington Valentine, Benjamin St. Juste, how are those guys going to guard Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams with Sean McVay calling plays and Matthew Stafford slinging the rock? I mean, that's the second biggest like mismatch that I would be worried about.
Yeah, but to be fair, the matchup of their corners, even though they've added new corners,
that's true,
to our receivers is almost as big a gap, and their safeties are much worse than ours.
Yes,
so they're not getting help from the safeties that we are.
If we can block their front, that's the problem. We have to block them first. But then if we
won't have time to run 20 yards downfield.
That's the problem. We won't get to their safety.
So the safeties can just
safeties can do whatever. They might not even need anybody back there, hypothetically. But no, you're right. Our receivers should have a mismatch on their corners as well, because McDuffie and Watson, big names. McDuffie did have a down year last year, and so you wonder. And there's also the whole thing about Chiefs corners have often left the Chiefs and not performed as well. So that's like on the table. Yes, McDuffie's been a very good player for the Chiefs for a long time. And, I think the Rams, like a first was the right kind of trade value for him. But there's always the case, L'Jarius Sneed went to the Titans and was just never the same player. So it's possible that outside of that system, he's just not as good. And he also was having a down year last year. But so I do think our receivers and our tight ends have an advantage against their corners and linebackers, because their linebackers are just middle of the pack and their safeties are just middle of the pack as well. The problem is going to be getting to them. And then the other thing is their offensive line is super elite and our defensive line is quite good. The issue is going to be like whether or not Micah is playing is like the matchup there, and like how much Micah
is he up
playing.
To full speed by Thanksgiving Eve.
Thanksgiving Eve is such a they're just milking that entire week now. I mean, they're because we were talking about
gone for Black Friday.
Well, it's that week. It's
Saturday too.
Well, that week it's the Sunday, the Monday, the Wednesday, the Thursday, the Friday, the Sunday, and the Monday. So it's 7 days of football in 9 days, because the only days in that like weekend or 8 days. I guess it's 8 days.
Tuesday and Saturday.
It's Tuesday and Saturday. It's like, oh my goodness. I love it. I love it, actually. No, 9 days, yeah. But so that's kind of how the Packers stack up against the Rams. I think kind of talking a little bit more, in general, we have historically had the Rams number. Like, we've beaten them. I don't think that LaFleur has ever lost to the Rams.
Beaten LaFleur. Sean McVay has never beaten LaFleur.
So there is that.
I would say that the offensive line is really, our tackles are okay. And I think that they're going to be pretty good. The interior of the offensive line is where it gets scary. Even the,
best case
green
scenario.
and gold tinted glasses only
Is like
gets the guards
23rd.
up to 20. It's not even that high.
Well,
It's
the
like
guards
27th
are
in the
the
league,
guards are
instead of
27th and the center is 19th. So I was just kind of taking the average there.
whole interior.
Of the whole
Yeah.
interior, yeah. The interior is
That's the better scenario.
Jagger Burton, please save us. please save us, Jagger Burton. But yeah, so I think against the Rams, I think it's fair to say I'm okay with the Rams having better Super Bowl odds than us. Is there anything else about the Rams that you'd like to talk about, or should we move on to the next team?
Yeah, it's crazy that they'd get the number 2 defensive interior without the interior defensive line, D tackles without Aaron Donald.
Yeah, and it does kind of seem like that the momentum is moving towards him coming back, right? It seems like all of the stories
out with the team or
working out with the team.
seeing,
And
how do I feel? Do I feel like doing this?
And the thing is, it was like, I think Mina Kimes was saying that was like, she was like, I'd forgotten how good.
She can't be
like,
happy about this.
Well, exactly. But she was like, saying that she had been looking at Aaron Donald's last year by the numbers, and he was still, I think, like number 1 in like pass rush win rate amongst D tackles that year. Like, and it's like, even if he's like 80% of what he was, he's still probably a top 10 defensive tackle in the league. Like, it's a problem. It's the classic. And Aaron Donald was a problem, and he might still be. Let's move on though to the Seahawks, the reigning Super Bowl champions. And do you want to talk a little bit about how Green Bay matches up with them? We have them as the second best team, and once again, like we said, Green Bay is the 5th best team.
Yeah, so they're closer together to each other in overall team offense and defense. Seattle being number 5 defense, Green Bay number 7. Seattle number 4 offense, Green Bay number 8. Their corners are a lot better than ours. Our edge rushers are much better than theirs. The safeties are kind of similar. Their defensive tackles are a little better. Their linebackers were much better last year, but our linebackers had a down year. We ended up, getting
Campanile
our linebackers. Yeah, when Campanile is gone, they went from probably what was the number 4 linebacker group to 23 because Edgerrin Cooper himself dropped from the second best to the 44th, best grade, I should say, or best score.
Mm-hmm.
We have a better quarterback. Their offensive line is not great either.
No, it's not. They're just okay. They're
just okay, kind of in the middle of the pack at every position. At least every position group, their average.
But
center, guard.
3 average position groups does get you to about the 12th best offensive line, which is, it's not bad. It's pretty good. It's decent.
So it's better than ours, where we have a 26 group and a 31 group dragging it down.
They simply have to play better this year. They simply have to. Like, please, for the love of God, can the offensive line just be average?
Yep. The running backs are kind of similar.
Which I'm a little surprised. I'm a little surprised their running backs are ranked, so high, losing Kenneth Walker. I think part of that is going to be seeing how Charbonnet looks when he comes back, because he did have a pretty serious injury at the end of the year. Because other than that, it's Emmanuel Wilson, which good player, but I never had a role quite like this before. But also, of course, they took Jadarian Price in the first round, so I guess he's probably going to be the starter right away. Yeah, and generally, first round running backs, like, we can talk about value, but the hit rate is usually pretty decent on first round running backs.
Right. I think that's part of it. Let me see. Who did they actually listing as their starter?
I think
actually Charbonnet is listed as a starter.
Yeah. I mean, if he's back healthy, I think Charbonnet, I've always thought Charbonnet was a little overrated and they should always play Kenneth Walker more, but I think Charbonnet is like solid. He's like fine. I just felt like I would get frustrated and be like, why are you running Charbonnet so much? Just put Kenneth Walker back out there. He's so much better. And then Kenneth Walker got a lot more touches. And I was like, see, Kenneth Walker's really good. But now they don't have Kenneth Walker. But let's talk a little bit about...
They have a lot better running back depth than we do.
Yes.
With I mean,
Well, and
it could turn out that we would like to have Emmanuel Wilson, who might be their third running back, as our starter.
Maybe.
Get him back.
I want to ask you a question, though, that's not on this sheet, and we'll maybe get back to the sheet in just a second. Who do you think has the better coaching staff? Whole staff. So keep in mind, the big thing with the Seahawks is they lost their offensive coordinator, Kubiak, who is now the head coach of the Raiders, which could be a huge thing. And they went and hired, I think, the run game coordinator of the Niners, I believe it was where he was previously. I'll double check that really quick. But how do you think the coaching staffs compare?
That's a good question. I think their defensive coaching is better, compared to.
Although LaFleur is 1-0. LaFleur is 1-0 against. You're saying defense to defense. Yes. McDonald is a better defensive coach than Gannon. I don't think he gives breaking any news here.
Than Gannon's giving to the defense, but I think our offensive coaching is much better than theirs. Is likely anyway, because
probably. Brian Fleury is the new OC. Brian Fleury is the new OC with Seattle, just because I mentioned it. He was previously the tight ends coach and run game coordinator with the Niners.
Right, and so we don't know how much a Niners assistant has to do with actually helping on the offensive side of the ball with Shanahan running the show. And it's similar to, hiring the Packers offensive coordinator and seeing how well that works out.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit for the Niners. It's been a little hit or miss. Like Mike McDaniel, obviously that's a hit. He's done very good stuff since leaving the Niners. And then I cannot remember his name, the now OC of the Dolphins, who was previously the OC of the Texans, and I cannot remember his name right now, but that one didn't go quite as well. But yeah, so how much is that just like, okay, this guy knows Shanahan, but Shanahan's really doing all the stuff? Unclear. But so I do think it's fair to say we have better offensive coaching, they have better defensive coaching, and tiebreaker, their special teams must have better coaching than ours because it's way better than ours. Well, we don't know.
New coach.
We don't know. We got a new coach. Acord. It's Acord time. It's Acord era. So that's possible, but I'll believe it when I see it. I think talking about whether or not it's reasonable for the Seahawks to be Super Bowl odds better than the Packers. I mean, obviously. They won the Super Bowl, and they won it very convincingly. Very, very convincingly.
And they're ranked number 2 overall by this metric.
By our numbers.
Our tight end's better. Their receivers better on the backs of one superstar, but still the grade better.
And again, our receivers are better, but again, I think if we looked at this matchup, like they played head to head, which they're not scheduled this year, unlike the Rams. But if we played this matchup head to head, my biggest concern would be, can we block these guys? Because every single team that went up against the Seahawks last year, and yes, they've lost some guys. They don't have Boye Mafe anymore. There's another defensive lineman that I'm forgetting off the top of my head that I believe they lost as well. But it's not quite the same defensive line as last year. But every team that went up against them, the Niners, the Patriots, the Rams blocked them okay, but the Niners and Patriots specifically couldn't block their entire front, and the whole offense crumbled. And that would be my big concern if the Packers and Seahawks were to match up, is what are we going to do up front? Because a lot of teams can't block them, and as soon as you can't block them, you just lose.
Yeah, and that's going to be the big concern of the Packers going to the year is the offensive line.
Yeah, which we've kind of
how much they can improve over their year-long performance last year. So end of the year, a sign of things to come. Will Belton actually improve this year in the second year and a chance to actually practice his position in the offseason? So that's if you want to look for something that's a little rosier than what I've got, that's not baked into any calculations or Burton stealing somebody's job, which would mean that he's better than who's there.
You know what's kind of crazy about the Seahawks? For how dominant they were last year, and truly a dominant run, in week 14 or whatever this was, they had to make a field goal with 29 seconds left to beat Phillip Rivers and the Colts in what I believe was Phillip Rivers' first start back, and they won 18-16. He was
like throwing the ball 5 yards at max.
How is this game so close? How would they only beat the Colts with Phillip Rivers? I'm pretty sure this was his first game back by 2 points. My goodness.
One of the things that surprised me from this whole exercise is that the Colts were 9th.
Yeah, I mean, the Colts...
They were probably the biggest surprise of teams ranked high.
I mean, what is it? But through 10 weeks last week, their offense was better than the undefeated 2007 Patriots. Like analytically, their numbers last year were pretty insane. So I'm not terribly surprised. But so far, anything else you want to say on the Seahawks? I think the big thing is, like, I think their defense would have a major advantage against our offense. I wonder what our defense would look like against their offense, given that they have a new play caller there. We have a new play caller on defense. And I think it's just a lot of unknowns with how does that offense look without Kenneth Walker and their play caller? Does Sam Darnold look as good with a different play caller? I think those are all fair questions. Of course, I would still say, yes, it's reasonable that the Seahawks are ahead of the Packers.
It's reasonable.
Yes, more than reasonable, in fact. I would be surprised if they weren't, actually, is I guess how I would say it.
Based on the numbers, this is the way it should be.
Yes. The next team, though, this one I think is going to be a bit of a more interesting conversation. The Niners. The Niners right now have the 5th best Super Bowl odds of any team in the league, which I was a little bit surprised to see because I think part of it, I think it's a couple things. They really were injured last year and still put together quite a good season. You know, Fred Warner doesn't play most of the year. Nick Bosa doesn't play most of the year. They're kind of banged up front. Brock Purdy is in and out of the lineup, and then they still make the playoffs and win a playoff game. So I think that's part of it. And then in the offseason, you know, they add Mike Evans, they add Osa Odigizua, and those are two, I think, pretty... The Odigizua one is going undermentioned. I think that's a really good add for them. But so they make those additions. They were good last year despite injuries. You're also factoring in the idea that they're going to get Warner and get Bosa back. However, I was a little bit surprised to see the Niners so far ahead of the Packers in Super Bowl odds. What do the numbers say about how we're looking at this matchup?
Yeah, so the Packers should be ahead. Packers are 5th overall. The Niners were 7th overall. The Niners' defense was weaker than I expected. This is the players who are going to be playing this year, not how many snaps they got last year. It has the Packers as number 7 defense. The Niners only 15th. Now, it has the Niners the better offense. 3rd overall, the Packers 8th.
Yeah. Keep in mind also the Niners are going to have a new defensive coordinator too. They're bringing in Raheem Morris to be DC now that Robert Saleh took the head coaching job with the Titans. So that's also a change there.
Yeah, so their corners are equally slightly below average.
Yeah.
The Niners defensive tackles are near the bottom of the league.
Mm-hmm.
They were
very young group
28th.
too. Yeah, a very young group that's very unproven. I mean, there's a chance they could improve, but they were not good last year.
And their safeties are also bad, 20th. So corners and safeties are both bad.
Mm-hmm.
Or a little below average. Defensive tackles are near the bottom of the league. Edge are good, top 10, number 8. And linebackers, number 4. So linebackers are excellent. So on the defensive side, they've got 3 good groups and 3 bad groups, ending up to be middle of the pack, 15th. Offense, 3rd overall. Well, part of it is Purdy actually grades out very well. Number 2 QB. Their offensive line, their guards are bad. Tackles are number 1. They have 2. Their 2 starting tackles are both in the top 5.
Yeah.
McKivitz actually graded out.
McKivitz had a nice year last year. It was probably a career year for McKivitz last year.
Yeah, so that's something I haven't calculated, which is how many players had a career year and then expect the regression.
Yeah. Well, the thing I want to talk a little bit about.
Tried to bake in here.
I want to talk a little bit about the Niners defense really quick before we move to their offense. Their pass rush was historically bad last year without Nick Bosa. And so they're kind of banking a lot on, and also, Michael Williams, their first round rookie, also got hurt last year with the season ending injury. So they were really banged up on defense last year, unfortunately. So that does factor into it. But as a team, I think I just looked it up. I think they only had 20 total sacks, which for reference, Myles Garrett by himself had more, which I know Myles Garrett's Myles Garrett, but you had less sacks than one guy had. And so that was last in the league. And yes, they were missing Bosa and Williams, and they're going to get those guys back. And then they're also going to add Odigizua into this. But I think there's still a lot of question marks on that pass rush. And like you mentioned, with their corners and safeties also being a little bit kind of up in the air, we'll say, and, below average, I think that that's a spot where the Packers would be able to generate big plays against this team because question marks in coverage and not a lot of pass rush, that should be a recipe for our offense to play well against their defense.
Yeah, I think their coverage is not good. Both the safeties and the corners, and their pass rush isn't good enough to punish us.
Yeah, I mean,
So
it's
with
their pass rush
receivers,
bouncing back. Their pass rush bouncing back is banking a lot on Bosa coming back and like having a full-time role and really putting the whole pass rush on his back. And Odigizua, playing better than he did last year because he had a bit of a down year last year, even though I think he's a good player.
Yeah, part of it, it's not. I mean, we have like Bosa playing, and he graded out well last year.
Yeah,
it's more that they're banking on Bosa playing the whole year and making everybody else's play better
job way easier.
In order to get.
Like we have Bosa in here. We have them with the 8th best edge group, but like he will have to like essentially elevate that whole defensive line room. And then kind of just looking through the rest of how the Niners match up. I mean, we have them with the second best quarterback. Brock Purdy like usually grades out really well along all the analytics stuff, especially like in that Shanahan system. He does really well in it. And then Packers 5th with Jordan Love. And then in terms of looking at some other matchups, I mean, we have their receiver core really low. So that's kind of like a week on week in terms of their wide receiver room versus our corners. However, I do think it's interesting just to point out, like, I'm curious to see what Mike Evans looks like in this offense. I'm curious. I was a Deshaun Stribling fan. Now, I didn't think he was going to go that high, but I liked him a lot coming out of Ole Miss. He was one of my favorite, like, day 2 receivers, and he went at the top of day 2, so I didn't think it was that crazy where they took him. And then Ricky Pearsall, when he plays, is decent. But the issue is that a lot of those guys have missed time and are more unknowns. So I'm not surprised to see them ranked so lowly just because Pearsall was so in and out last year. And then when he did play, he was already banged up, so his numbers were worse than like when he was fully healthy at the start of the year. And then Mike Evans had kind of an up and down year last year dealing with injuries as well. And then we have right now them ranked as the number 2 tight ends, but I think that's kind of assuming that Kittle is going to be back sooner rather than later. Yeah. I think he's targeting week 1, it sounds like, but I think that would be a really fast recovery given that he tore his Achilles in the first round of the playoffs. So that would be like a record time recovery, which would be awesome if possible. But I do think that's maybe a little optimistic. I mean, he is a freak, so you never know. But I do think that that's kind of like, there is a little bit of like uncertainty coloring their like skill position player grades, because we also have, for running back, we have them. They didn't run the ball very well last year with McCaffrey, but he caught the ball really well. So we don't have them ranked super high because the running grades were low. But in terms of him being older, their pass catching group being older, Kittle coming back from injury, I do think there's a lot of uncertainty there, even if, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't grade very well except for at tight end. Both the running backs and the wide receivers graded in the bottom third of the league. And the wide receivers actually like bottom 3. 4th worst in the league, I guess. But and that's just how they played last year. That's Evans playing in the games he played in. And same with Pearsall. And actually they have like Christian Kirk listed as their wide receiver 3 instead of the rookie. But that probably doesn't make it it wouldn't swing the position group overall very much for wide receiver 3, a rookie versus kind of a middling player. So I don't know how much better Evans is going to get, at this stage. I don't know whether they'll get much more from him than he had last year, just in terms of quality play, even if he stays healthy. I think their offensive line is, 4th best in the league. So that's going to make everything a little bit better.
Yeah, although some question marks there with Trent Williams, a year old, he's very good, but he can't be very good forever. He is getting older, and the age cliff comes for everyone. So it's like a kind of a math of like, it hasn't come yet. Yeah, hasn't come yet.
And, the tight end, Kittle probably won't actually play in the beginning of the year for a while.
He said he's aiming for week 1. I guess we'll see. I don't know.
I guess we'll see. But this is kind of the expectation that, in terms, I didn't go to the detail of making a first 8 game grade and a second 8 game grade. It's like, let's just deal with the optimal lineup.
Yeah, optimal lineup. Yep.
Every team hopes we've got guys who miss first half of the year, but we'll get them.
They'll be back
for the stretch run, and that's will be good. and not guessing who's going to be hurt before that happens.
But so to kind of wrap this up, because we're getting a little long on the Niners, if they played each other today, full strength, let's say full strength, let's say Kittle's playing, let's say Kraft and Tom and Micah are playing, let's say Bosa's playing, Warner's playing, who do you think wins that game? Because there's the kind of, I think the Packers win, but there is the Shanahan has beaten LaFleur more times than LaFleur has beaten Shanahan.
I think LaFleur's only beaten him once?
Twice.
Maybe twice.
I think it was twice. It was once 2 years ago when they had to play Brandon Allen, I think it was, at quarterback in Lambeau.
Oh, is that one? And then there's the one.
And then there was the one that Rodgers came back and Mason Crosby hit the game-winning field goal.
The two passes to Devonte Adams up the middle, they only had 30 seconds left, and they got the game.
I don't know why you're not covering Devonte Adams with 30 seconds left, but hey, you do you. That's a you problem. But no, I think the Packers. I would pick the Packers to win that game. Maybe not on the road.
I think the Packers should be favored in that game.
But I think it'd be close. I think it'd be like a 3-point spread. But we are getting long. I've made a executive decision. I hope it's okay. We're going to cut the Cowboys because we're already getting at 50 minutes, and I don't think we have time for 3 more teams to talk about. And since the Cowboys are tied for odds, I figure, hey, we'll just leave them out. But let's move on to the Lions.
We're going to beat them anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Let's move on to the Lions, who the Packers are playing this year. And the Lions I was surprised to see. I know that their schedule is easier, so there's the idea that they're more likely to win the division, and so they're more likely to have an easier path in the playoffs. But I was surprised to see the Lions all the way up at the 8th best Super Bowl odds. I know their offense is very impressive. I think Campbell's a good coach. I got a lot of questions about that defense. They have, because you can talk about the Packers have a bunch of injury question marks, but both of the Lions starting safeties are coming off of pretty much season-ending injuries. And then they just have Aiden Hutchinson as an edge rusher, so they don't really have a great complement. I guess they took more in the second round, so that's the possibility there. And we've talked a lot about the NFC North, so I don't want to talk too much about this one. If you want our full discussion about the Lions and the NFC North and how the Packers stack up against them, I think we can go maybe a little bit shorter on this one than we did the last few. But were you surprised to see the Lions so high, and how do you feel like the Packers stack up against them?
So I'm a little surprised at how high they were. Their defense, and I have them ranked 10th overall. Their defense is 21st, but their offense is 2nd.
Yeah, I mean, the offensive line has been good.
Actually, still grades very well.
Yeah. Because they're shuffling the offensive line a little bit, which we talked about in the NFC North pod. But it should probably still be. It should be better than it was last year, I think, when it had a bit of a down.
Penei Sewell is great. He's been the number 1 and number 2 tackle for 4 years. But this is all, it all depends a lot on, is Blake Miller any good?
Yeah, first round tackle they took out of Clemson. They're going to have him at right tackle. I think he's probably pretty good. And then I think the other question is, how does the interior look this year? Because it was kind of a mess last year.
Yeah, though I guess the center position was bad. The guards,
which is why they brought in Mays to come play center for them. Which I like that signing. I think it was a good value.
But the on the defensive side, they're kind of a mess. They're in the bottom third in every position group except safety, which they're rated 5th, but that's counting on the optimal lineup.
Two best safeties coming back. Yeah,
best safeties who Kirby Joseph
is dealing with some kind of knee thing. I'm unclear on what it was, but he
was I don't know when he's going to be able to play.
Exactly. Yeah, that was kind of a weird knee thing. And then Brian Branch unfortunately tore his Achilles near the end of the year, so he's going to be coming back off injury there as well. And so their best position group is that's an issue there, because corner with Terrion Arnold got cut because of his off the field issues. And then linebacker, I think Jack Campbell's good, but I think they still have some other question marks there with Anzalone leaving. And then edge opposite Aiden Hutchinson has been a place that they've been trying to fix for a while. Like we talked about, they had that second round pick. And then defensive interior, it's pretty much just kind of Ali McNeil. And he had a bit of a down year last year. Now we'll see if he bounces back. But yeah, I think it's a lot of question marks along that defense that I was surprised to see them so high in the Super Bowl odds given those question marks.
Yeah, I think the Lions are falling into their roster is starting to, deteriorate.
The offense looks good, though. The offense looks really good. And so I do think
their receivers are good. Their running back is excellent. Their tight ends are good. Their offensive
running
line
back,
is still
running back
good.
2 is more of a question mark, though. They love that
Yes.
two-headed monster, and so I mean, personally, I don't think Pacheco really has it anymore. Ever since he had that leg injury, unfortunately, and I think they're going to miss Montgomery this year. I mean, more work for Gibbs is probably a good thing just because he is so good. But just having a worse second running back, I think, will hurt that running game a little bit. Although you could argue, like, okay, you lose some stuff on the second running back, but you get a slightly better offensive line. Maybe that counteracts that, which I think is a fair argument. But yeah, and then receiver-wise, we know what their receivers are. Like, they're going to be good with Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams providing big plays. And then Laporta is hopefully back healthy this year after dealing with a back injury last year. So I do think their offense is going to be quite good. Now they bring in, is it Drew Petzing, I believe, as their offensive coordinator, who had been with the Cardinals before. So I think I think they're hoping he's better than, man, I forget who their offensive coordinator was last year, but it's not that important. So I think they're hoping for a bounce.
The guy Campbell kept taking place.
The guy Campbell took, Campbell was the OC last year pretty much for the entire second half of the year. But yeah, so I don't think we need to talk too much more about the Lions. I would pick the Packers ahead of them, but I do think it'd be a shootout. Like the second game last year was pretty close. So
I think the Packers are a better team. I think they got a better roster. I think they're a better team.
Better roster. I think a better quarterback. Not that I think Goff is bad, but I just think Love is better. We have Goff, I think we have him 11th. No, we have him 9th amongst quarterbacks. So,
and
still
a couple years ago,
but
he was like graded as like top 3 or 4.
I mean, when you're scoring 40 points a game, like it's going to be.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that does it for the Lions.
The offensive line is not quite as good, and I think he's exposing his weaknesses.
Yeah. Let's move on to the last team, though, that we're going to talk about, the Philadelphia Eagles. I think this is a really interesting discussion because I think on paper, I like the Packers, but also we cannot figure out Vic Fangio to save our lives. We can never, ever score on this guy. So for reference, the Eagles have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11th best Super Bowl odds. So I guess we'll just start talking about them. How do you feel like the Eagles, and how do the numbers say the Eagles match up against the Packers?
Yeah, so they're not that far off from their odds. I have them as 13th. I mean, the big thing in this, why we think the Packers should be much higher. Some of these other teams are about where they belong, but the Eagles, I have them 13th. Their defense is still good at 6th, but their offense is only 17th. They actually have the lowest graded offense of these contenders in the NFC. Their corners are good, second best in the league. Everybody knows. Everybody knows why.
Yep.
why
Jordan Morgan's about to rewrite the narrative this year. He's about to be a star left tackle. I believe. I hope.
And their linebackers are good. 6th best. They got Zach Bond and turned around his career and became, one of the best.
I always liked Zach
linebackers
Bond
in the league. Their defense. I was surprised that their D tackles are only mid now, and their edges are 10th best. Not quite as ferocious up front as they were a few years ago. And their safeties are bad. But overall, the defense is still good. That's 6th best.
Yeah, I think part of the D tackles, just to touch on that really quick, is Carter was dealing with like some kind of really terrible double shoulder injury last year. And so I think they're hoping he's better this year, but I think it was to the point where it was like he couldn't do a push-up because like his shoulders were so injured. So I think that's part of the reason he had such a down year last year. And I do think he is like the linchpin of that defense up front. Like he's what makes it all kind of work because he's so dominant. But I let's just say, just because their defense interior is ranked bad, I would still be worried about it matching up against our offensive interior.
Curious to see how well it would look if I looked at it 2 years ago, or just looked at like Carter's, a couple of the players' grades from 2024 instead of 2025.
Yeah, I mean, how do you feel? How would you feel about Banks, Ryan, Ryan and Belton, Ryan and Belton matching up against Carter and Davis on the other side? I would not feel good. That's the thing is like, I think the Eagles are like, and we don't play the Eagles this year in the regular season, but I would be concerned about our front versus their front, like our offensive line versus their defensive line. Like that would be majorly concerning to me because we saw it last year. We couldn't move the ball. We couldn't move the ball at all.
Our offensive line was kind of a mess last year, though. Walker was not good.
Yes, and we changed.
It's not a heavy lift for Morgan to be better.
I would say, how much did we change though? The coach is the same. The center.
That one I don't.
That was the game. That was the game that Elton Jenkins got hurt in. So Elton was the center in that game. Walker is now Morgan, but I think Morgan played guard in that game and got his ass beat. Aaron Banks played in that game.
He played bad at guard. He played well at tackle. Played bad at guard.
I'm just saying. My issue with the Eagles is I think on paper, like, we have a better quarterback. I think we have a better head coach. I think we have like a better, I think the talent on defense is comparable. Maybe the Eagles is a little bit better. I think the Eagles have a better defensive coach. But every time we match up against these guys, Vic Fangio eats our lunch and we can't block their front. Like, every single time.
Yeah. Our skill position players are much better than theirs at every group.
Especially now that AJ Brown is gone. That's a major thing there.
Wide receivers are below average. The running back,
Saquon had a bad year. I'd take Saquon over
Saquon,
Jacobs,
but he had a bad year last year. Is that him slowing down? Was that because the offensive line had a bit of a down year?
Well, speaking of offensive line and down years, I want to talk about that really quick because I think an underrated storyline of the offseason that not enough people are talking about is that the Eagles, like, maybe not legendary, but like maybe one of the better like offensive line coaches of the last like 30, 40 years, Jeff Stoutland, just left the team because he was like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I wonder what that does for their offensive. He's still out there. Still available. But maybe that's why we're holding on to Butkus for a year, just so we can just get Stoutland in the next cycle. Cope. But anyway, I do wonder about their offensive line and how it's going to look without Stoutland.
Yeah, I mean, that's another one of those things where it's kind of like the Seahawks losing Kubiak.
Yeah.
How much is that going to affect their offense, which was good last year?
And speaking of their offense, it should look a little familiar to us because they did hire Sean Mannion, who I would imagine is going to run a lot of like Packers-y things, but like with maybe just like a Jalen Hurts flavor, like more stuff that he likes as well. I don't know. I'm curious to see what that offense looks like.
It's going to be very different. It's like very curious. They basically promoted him 2 steps.
Yeah, they liked him a lot.
OC. Yeah,
and
I was hoping that the Packers would be able to hold on to him longer. I was not
too.
Happy to see him leave already.
Yeah, I mean,
I wouldn't mind it if the Packers made him OC.
Yeah, but I mean, he's getting the play calling OC, so he still would have taken that job.
Like, his gig is better than he would have gotten for the Packers.
Exactly. And I do think it's interesting. Like, I mean, a lot of people have talked about the Eagles over the offseason, but like when they draft Mekhi Lemon and Stowers, like 2 guys that, like, I'm not saying anything new. I've heard this other places, but like people like pointed out that like those are 2 guys that like to win over the middle of the field. Jalen Hurts does not like to throw over the middle of the field. Mannion, like a lot of the Packers have historically liked to throw over the middle of the field, the like Shanahan kind of type of offense. Like, there's gold in the middle of the field. And so is this something where they're going to be like, hey, Hurts, it's time to learn middle of the field, buddy. Like, we are throwing the rock there. We got you the tools. We got you the play caller. This is what we're doing now, and we're going to see how it goes. But so I'm interested in that. But just to talk about more specifically the matchup between the Packers and the Eagles, on paper, like I said, by the numbers that we're looking at here, I'd be really worried about our offensive line versus defensive line. And honestly, I don't even need to look at these numbers for that because I just saw it on the field last year. We couldn't block these guys like at all. So that's
also
my number.
Terrible offensive game plan.
Yeah, I mean,
in that
we
game.
couldn't do it. We couldn't do anything though. It's hard to run any offensive game plan if you can't block anyone. Like, we were getting ran through every single play, and so that would be my number one concern. My second concern would be, I mean, the thing is, I do think that with them having fewer offensive weapons, now we'll see how Lemon looks this year for them. Kind of not taking on the AJ Brown role, but like taking those snaps. I do think that we'd be okay on defense because, Gannon also has some familiarity with the Eagles. So there's that as well. So, you never know if he has a little bit of an advantage there. But given that he was the DC there before, if you didn't know. But I do think, unfortunately, I think I would pick the Eagles in this matchup.
I don't think I would. Of all of the contenders, Hurts is the second worst QB ahead of Stroud.
Let me be clear. I don't think the Eagles are better than any of the teams that we've talked about. I think they just present
Just a bad matchup.
We cannot beat these guys. Like, we have not been able to figure them out. What is it? They've beaten us 3 straight times, I think it is. And like most of them were one of them was close, I would say. Like the opener again in Brazil, where that was a pretty close game. Weird game though. The playoff game where they kind of beat the crap out of us. It was not as close as the score. I'll say that. And then the game last year, which was also not as close as the score because we could not move the ball. And I think it seems like Fangio just kind of has LaFleur's number right now. I don't know. I think the offensive line would need to play way better this year than we're projecting them to for us to beat them.
Well, this is kind of like what you could say about the Rams versus the Packers. The Rams have not been able to beat LaFleur.
It's true.
How many people think that's going to hold up this year?
But on paper, I don't. You see what I'm saying about the Eagles' defensive line and my concerns there, right?
Yeah. If they play like they did 2 years ago,
it's hard to do a lot with the 30th ranked offensive line.
Yes, it's got to be better.
That's going to be tough.
I think if the offensive line actually performs like the 30th,
we're not. We're not
big problem.
We might come in third or fourth in the division if the offensive line plays like. It's actually kind of a miracle that we made the playoffs last year with this offensive line. Now that I'm like, the more I look at it, I'm like, how did we function with blowing blocks and unable to block anything along the middle? I don't know. I mean, shout out Jordan
Right.
Love.
So we had a good offense last year with a bad offensive line already.
That's true. And a lot of injuries to the skill players.
It is within the realm of possibility.
See, this is a good argument. I like
for
this.
us
Please
to get
continue.
up in the top half of the league on offensive line.
I'll take top 20. I'll take top 20. Yeah, I'll take top 20. But I do think that's
the realm of possibility.
It's a very good argument that the offensive line was, if not 30th, in that below 25th last year, and the offense was still really good. And so, if the offensive line is average, think about how good the offense could be. But anyway, any final thoughts on the Packers versus the Eagles? It sounds like you would pick the Packers in that matchup. So it kind of sounds like
Packers.
It sounds like we think that the Packers should be fourth best in the third or fourth best in the NFC, depending on you versus me. I would have us below the Rams and the Seahawks, but next in that next group of teams, as opposed to a full 2 tiers down. Which, kind of circling back to our last episode, Packers underrated. I'm just going to say it. Any final thoughts on this exercise, Dad, before we wrap things up?
No, I think that's it. It was something I wanted to be able to do in a sensible way. It took a lot of time, but I wanted to be able to put things together in a objective manner and use as many sources as possible.
No, yeah, it's always good to be objective, and it's always good when the objective things tell you your team is good, except for the offensive line. We won't look at that part too much. But anyway. Thank you again so much.
Sprinkle a little magic dust on the offensive line to make a better projection.
Yeah, let's delete the 0 and 30 and make it third best. But anyway, this has been the Father Son Packers podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you hear, subscribe, whether that's Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and then Amazon as well. Leave a comment, leave a review, tell a friend, tell a stranger, leave a like. We would greatly appreciate it. Follow us on Blue Sky at Father Son Packer for updates on the latest Packers related news. But anyway, thank you again for listening. And until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.